Hey guys, every time I do a video that talks about these programs that are available from the federal government to help out farmers and ranchers in their time of need, I get hammered in my comments about welfare programs for farmers and ranchers. And there are even a lot of farmers and ranchers that come into the comments to say, if you can't farm without these programs, then you shouldn't be farming. I've always thought that this is really ludicrous because every farmer ranch faces challenges that come along in such a manner that it puts their farm or ranch at risk. And I want to talk about one of those challenges that my family dealt with personally in this video tonight. Hey guys, my name's Will. This is the Back 40, and let's talk about it. As I'm making this video from my kitchen tonight, I'm looking out the window and I'm seeing what every farmer and rancher wants to see: a nice steady rain falling on tall green grass. And if these rains continue throughout this year, this could turn out to be a great year for farms and ranches across the United States of America. But I've got to tell you, 2011 was a much different year. 2011 was a personal challenge for me as a man, and it was also a challenge for our family cattle farm operation. Since 1999, I have been a single father of 4 kids. Raised them by myself with a lot of help from wonderful women in my church and from people in my family. But the bottom line is, I was a single dad. And in 2011, I had kids at home and I was responsible for them. I was also an executive with a telecom company. I was driving 3 hours a day to work every day, and many times I was logging into my computer at night to work on critical issues from home. But something even harder happened that year, something very sad and very difficult for our entire family. Since I had moved back to Southwest Missouri in 2007, I'd been helping my family operate our cattle farm in Southwest Missouri. This was a 300 cow-calf operation, and it required a lot of significant work, not only from me, but from my sons and from my family and hired hands as well. But that year in 2011, my stepdad went to the doctor, and while he was there, they discovered that he had a serious health problem. He was taken to the hospital, but unfortunately, instead of being able to leave the hospital and come home healthy, other than just a half a day at home one time where he got an opportunity to drive around the farm and see it for the last time, he ended up passing away in the hospital. This was totally unexpected, and it really threw our family for a loop. And from that point forward, I stepped up with the rest of the family to help operate the cattle farm on a full-time basis while working, while being a single dad. And I've got to tell you that while it was one of the most rewarding periods of my life, it also was one of the most challenging times in my life for me as a man, as a dad, and as an entrepreneur. Because the other thing that happened that year is that Missouri and the Midwest and much of the country suffered from one of the most serious droughts we'd had in over 100 years. The last rain came at the beginning of June, and it didn't rain again until late September, early October. We lost forage for the entire year. All the creeks dried up, all the ponds dried up for the most part, and all the wet weather springs quit putting out water. And farmers all across the country and ranchers all across the country suffered one of the most serious losses in production, like I said, that they had faced for over 100 years. But that's where the federal government stepped up to implement these programs that help so many farmers out. And let me tell you what they did. First of all, if you're a cattle farmer in this country, if you have a drought like that, you lose what's called forage, which is the grass in the field or whatever else you've planted that your cattle eat. And when you lose that forage, the federal government steps in and it provides funding to help replace the loss of that forage. My family was very lucky. We had to buy very little hay that summer because we had put up hundreds of bales of hay because we had good hay fields and we had had decent rains and we hadn't had to feed a lot of that hay. So we had enough hay to get us through that summer, but many farmers and ranchers didn't. And because of that, the federal government stepped up to offer this program to help defer the cost of lost forage for farmers that did have to buy a lot of hay to keep their farms in place. The other thing that happened, as I mentioned before, is that water supplies disappeared. Southwest Missouri is a wonderful place to raise cattle because we have a lot of water here. We've got a lot of underground aquifers that are full. We have wet weather springs, we have creeks, we have stock tanks, we have lakes. But in a disaster drought like 2011, a lot of those water sources dried up. And when that happened, there were a lot of farmers were left with the challenge of having to haul water to their cattle. Once again, the federal government stepped in, and similar to the program that they had implemented to put rotational grazing in place, they paid for some farmers and ranchers that critically needed it to have wells dug on their property and to have water lines run in order to feed stock tanks at different points on their farm so that their cattle could drink water year round, regardless if there was drought or if it was the middle of the winter, and these programs helped work. Now, even though this program wasn't in place at the time we were raising cattle, I'll tell you that there are new programs that are in place now that are similar to crop insurance for cattle raisers. When there are market fluctuations that occur that a cattle raiser can't control, or when something happens with the weather, like a drought or even too much rain, these programs step up to offer some financial assistance to farmers that are possibly going to lose their farm or have a decrease in productivity because of that. Now, I'm including some pictures here of what the drought looked like before the drought, during the drought. I'm going to show you some of the replacement heifers that I set back during the drought to prepare for the next year, just to show you a little bit of a sample of what it looked like to operate a cattle farm in Southwest Missouri at the time. But the truth of the matter is, for many farmers and ranchers, these programs that the federal government offered made the difference between survival and going out of business. And similar to that, once we made the decision 4 or 5 years later to sell our family cattle farm, I went into a new type of agriculture. I bought a 200-acre farm and I began doing agroforestry on that farm. I raised acres of elderberry, I planted Chinese chestnut orchards, I raised ginseng, and there were programs available to educate me as a farmer wanting to get into this new type of farming as to how to do it. The federal government stepped up and offered funding for a forest plan for my farm. I also had USDA and Missouri conservation people that came out to my farm and walked me through the best places to plant my Chinese chestnut crops, etc., where to put my elderberries, how to control water flow on my farm. These programs were all critical for me moving out of the cattle raising business into the agroforestry and intensive agriculture business to learn how to do that, rather than just watching videos on YouTube or rolling the dice and hoping for the best. And then after I suffered from some really significant health problems in 2024 and made the decision to sell my larger farm and get more into the retail end of farming, the government was there again to provide training opportunities for me to learn how to produce straight to market food products, to learn how to do new types of farming like growing mushrooms, etc. These programs are critical for farmers because they help them cope with changing economic times. Because when you look at my personal situation, just from 2011 to 2024, in that short period of time in someone's overall life, we faced the loss of a family member, one of the worst droughts that we've ever seen in Southwest Missouri, the sale of our farm, the purchase of a new farm, a changeover in the agriculture that we were doing, and finally, because of health reasons, a switch into direct-to-market sales. And the federal government created programs, especially under Joe Biden and Democratic presidents, to make those transitions smoother. So while I get it that these programs can be called welfare because they are there as a social safety net to help out farmers in their time of need, they're also critical programs that help us supply food to the American people. Because here's the dirty little secret about agriculture in America. Our family farms and ranches are disappearing at an alarming rate. They're being bought up by large corporate ag and by Wall Street, and our silos of agricultural production in this country are getting worse and worse. I remember when I was going through the ranch management program at Texas Christian University, I studied forage and I studied animal nutrition there. And I can remember at that time that we were just beginning to talk about the fact that small family farms and ranches had really suffered in the 1980s during the Reagan administration, and that we were passing into a new period where small family farms and ranches were beginning to disappear at an alarming rate. That happened again during the first Trump administration, and for the last 10 years, even through the Biden administration, we've broken the record almost every year in the number of small family farms and ranches being bought up by big ag and by Wall Street. So these programs that we call welfare, fair enough if that's what you want to call them, are critical programs that help farmers and ranchers control the risk on their farms. Because there's something I think we forget about in this effort to demonize each other because of politics. We forget that small family farmers and ranchers also are living a life that coincides with what they do on the farm. I wasn't just helping run my family's cow-calf operation. I was a single dad working 60 hours a week for a large telecom company. I was driving 3 hours every day to work. I was experiencing serious health issues. I was going through all the same challenges that everyone else goes through in their everyday lives. But on top of that, I was trying to help my family operate a 300 cow-calf operation in Southwest Missouri. So these challenges that we face are real. They're the same challenges that other Americans face, but the consequences of us failing are not just personal consequences for us. They're not just individual personal failures. The consequence of farmers and ranchers failing across this country is a loss of food production that impacts everybody in our nation. Or it's the gobbling up of small family farms and ranches by corporate ag and by Wall Street, which leads to a siloed agriculture environment where only certain products are raised on a grand scale to ensure profitability. And diversity in agriculture goes away. Diversity in the food supply goes away. And resilience in the food supply goes away. So I hope these personal stories will help you better understand the challenges not only that small family farms and ranchers face, but why these government programs are also so critical to helping small family farms and ranches survive. In rural America, we've got to have an open mind as to why people get so upset when they see us vote against politicians that support these programs, but then cry really loudly when these programs go away or when we suffer the consequences of our vote. It is a legitimate argument for people to make because it's their tax dollars along with ours that are going to pay for these programs that are bailing us out in our time of need. Now, not just bailing us out, but bailing the nation out because we provide the food that feeds the nation. But at a minimum, we can, on our own behalf, vote for politicians and policies that are good for rural America. Good ag policy that leads to better methods of production. Saving our schools in rural America so that small family farms can continue to exist because our young people don't move away. Growing infrastructure and businesses that allow people to live the same quality of life in rural America that they do in our urban cities. And finally, saving the very critical healthcare institutions that are in place that are necessary to keep farmers and ranchers healthy so that they can stay on their farms and continue to farm and to provide the food that America needs. So I hope in telling my own personal story, contrary to what some people think, I don't just farm in my backyard. I hope that me sharing with you some of the challenges I faced in helping to operate our family's 300 cow-calf operation and in operating a 200-acre agroforestry farm, and now in doing intensive farming, raising mushrooms, and trying to get Missouri agricultural products to market. I hope by hearing my story, you better understand why these programs are significant, why they're necessary, and how they benefit not only American family farmers and ranchers, but the American people as a whole. Have a great day, everybody.